Welcome to CyberMAYnia, cyber talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. Brought to you by CyberRange Solutions. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CyberMAYnia. With me today is the amazing hyperscale captain, Dwayne Natwick. Dwayne, how are you?
Hello, May. I'm doing good, thank you.
Well, for me, it's afternoon. For you, it's morning. So
Yes.
I'm allowed to be hyper now, but not the same hyper. So, as always, we start these conversations with you telling us a little bit about you, yourself, and what got you into cybersecurity.
Yeah, thank you. It's really great to be on CyberMAYnia, and thank you for having me. So I've had a different journey. I talk to a lot of people that are in tech and everything, and they start off early with playing with computers and pulling computers apart. I never really was that. I was into sports and music and things like that, and not really into tech until really my adulthood or early adolescent years. Really, I started pulling cable from my dad. My dad had his own company and started doing structured cabling. So it was a long way from the cloud, but learned token ring and IBM AS400 systems when I was still in high school. So I went to university and again wasn't going to go into technology. I was a business management major and then didn't find work out of school, so I started working for my dad again. Got into distribution and kind of the rest is history. I just kind of went from there. And have evolved as I went through. One of the things that what probably got me into cybersecurity and into interest in cybersecurity was I took a grad degree program. I guess it was in my early 30s. It was not long after I was married and decided to do it while right after I had kids. Actually, I had babies at home and took a program that had project management and cybersecurity as kind of the two main focus areas. And I was more in project management at the time, but I started taking some of my elective courses were in cybersecurity and started really getting an interest. It was actually built around the CISSP. So it led me to my CISSP and really just led me to an interest in knowing more about how to protect people in technology. And it just really became one of those things, you kind of gravitate to things and get a passion about something. Cybersecurity just became what I liked to learn about and what I like to talk about. And that's really just kind of what drove me there. And even when I was like learning cloud and everything like that, I always seemed to gravitate towards the security aspects of the cloud and those types of solutions and how to protect data and how to protect identities and all of those things. So that's always just been kind of just where kind of the clouds led me ultimately. So that's kind of how I got into cybersecurity.
That's awesome. So you really started with the basic, and you mentioned token ring and cabling. And I actually found myself last night sitting with my 14-year-old daughter. She has an exam coming up in ICT, and she showed me what they were learning. So token ring and 7 layers, a little bit about 7 layers, and what's the OSI model, and what's a DNS and ping, and it was like, oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I can definitely help you with that. So that was, and she actually told me that I'm a good teacher. It was very surprising as a teenager to hear from my teenage daughter that I'm a good teacher. It was
that you're good at what you do, huh? Wow.
That was. I was very impressed by myself, I have to say. You mentioned cloud a few times, and yes, you started with a very not old tech, but sort of traditional networking, cables and everything, and went to the cloud. And you mentioned it a few times, the fact that you're into cloud. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the cloud? It sounds very like more amorphic.
Well, most recently, before October of last year, I was actually working with a global managed security service provider as their global cloud security lead. So, a company that had been very successful, been very strong in cybersecurity, but much more so in the protecting of the data center aspect and the perimeter aspect of cybersecurity. So what we were, and I've done this with a couple of different companies that are hosting companies and trying to get into providing services in the with cloud, with Azure and AWS and Google, and it's a challenge for a lot of these companies to kind of break outside, it's think outside the box, so to speak, and break outside of these traditional. I've got all of these, I'm going to protect this by putting all these appliances at the perimeter. How do I do that when there is no perimeter anymore? It's the internet. So I've spent a couple of years working with that within that organization to develop and to build the practice to understand, bringing them along with, understanding things around cloud security and what's different around, securing identities and securing, using encrypted channels and things of that nature that are much more important than just putting appliances at the gates.
So yeah, I think there's definitely a change, I would say, in the industry. I remember about, 10, 15 years ago when I was working for financial companies, insurance companies, banks, the idea of using the cloud, it was like, no. And my last CISO position was in a cloud native digital bank, completely digital. I remember that one of our consultants told me, but what are you going to do about your facilities? Like if there's a fire? I don't really care. Mm-hmm. We're all using laptops. We have nothing here except for the coffee machine, which is great. And I really like the coffee machine, but that's probably the most important equipment physically in the building. Like I don't care about the building. So I want to hear from you, because you've been with traditional companies, with hybrid companies, with cloud native companies. What are some of the key challenges or the key differences in the challenges of how they perceive cybersecurity in this transition from very traditional to cloud native?
I think you hit on a good amount of it, right? And this was even back 10 years ago when talking about transition to cloud and transforming to the cloud. How do you get started, and how do you move into the cloud? And you hit on a very key way that is a enormous driver to utilizing cloud technologies is business continuity and disaster recovery, because you can build a hot site in the cloud like that, and if you've got everybody connected on their laptops, doesn't matter where they are. So where a key aspect of in the previous world of having our own data centers and our private data centers, we had to build all of that, and we built offices to house the people to move to do the work and all of that. You have a lot more flexibility in that regard, and that's when you start making a decision to, I'm going to adopt more cloud technologies. I always say the first place to go is move your web servers, because obviously you don't need to have the capacity of a physical host to run your web server. You got it's going to be cheaper in the cloud. And then also business continuity and disaster recovery, use that and leverage that. Even if you're not ready to move all of your applications to the cloud, it gives you at least some business continuity plan, and something that you can test, and something that you can rely on and know that it's going to be there, and you can, and makes for a very easy transition plan to build that. So that, those are all things that that I always use as kind of the initial drivers, outside of when you talk to the hyperscalers, they're all like, they have cost at that first bullet all the time on their slides of drivers to move to the cloud. And I always tell everybody, if that's your driver to move to the cloud, you ought to update your resume while you're updating your plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And but you mentioned something, and that's always been one of the things that I've been concerned with. You come from sort of the cloud. I come from the security first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many advantages to moving to the cloud. Things are so much easier. You can have, as you said, business continuity like that, super easy. And also you can have so many services that in the past were only relevant for like big enterprises with deep pockets. And today you can do it in a heartbeat, super easy. How do you still incorporate security into those processes? Because it's not just cloud, traditional cloud, but I always see it as cloud with APIs, with all the integrations. We have so many service providers, and we are completely reliant on them. If I'm looking at today at companies, they have hundreds of critical APIs. They're completely reliant on them. They're completely reliant on someone else to manage their infrastructure. And what if Bill Gates decides to pull the plug? Well, like, what happens then?
That's an interesting point, because we were talking before we went live. I was teaching the ISC2 CCSP class last week, and that a key component of talking about that particular certification is APIs, is all of those connecting points that you have with the internet and with vendors, and understanding your supply chain. And you pointed out, Bill Gates and Microsoft. Obviously, when we think about the cloud, we think Microsoft, we think AWS, we think Google, but there's hundreds and thousands of other cloud vendors out there, cloud partners out there that we utilize and that we tie into. Just for some security ones, we have like CrowdStrike and Wiz and all of those different vendors as well. And we need to, and that's a key component of security and continuity of it all, is understanding and avoiding potential vendor lockout and vendor lock-in, because this company ceases to exist. Or I'll use an example of something that happened last August, September, when Cisco bought Splunk.
Yeah.
Those are two very reputable companies, but now they're coming together. And what's going to happen from a business perspective as that transitions? How is that going to affect my business? Like you said, we have at our disposal, using cloud technologies and all of these vendors, very enterprise grade cybersecurity tools at our disposal. But we need to make sure that as a company that's evaluating these for our environment, does it fit? Does it do what we need to do? Does it decrease risk the way that we want to? Doing proper business impact analysis of does it make financial sense? But also then from a supply chain standpoint, how stable is this company? What is their 5-year plan and things like that? You don't want to, somebody might have the latest and greatest and have some great new widget that comes out, but does it make sense to us? And is the risk worth the reward? Because this company might they might be a startup that is looking to sell off to a Cisco or somebody like that here in the next year or two. And how is that going to affect our business when that takes place?
Absolutely. And you know what? Also, who's responsible? last week, one of my friends asked me, why don't you get your LinkedIn page verified? And the reason is very simple, because I'm not in the, well, I didn't have the time to do the due diligence to their supplier that is doing the identity verification. Now, also, they want the identity verification to match my name on my passport, and it doesn't. So, because everyone calls me May, but I'm actually, the passport is actually Maytal. So I can change it on LinkedIn, but I don't really feel like doing that. So,
Right.
but also, who's responsible if something happens? If I put on my photo, my passport, whatever, because I trust LinkedIn, and that
Mhm.
company gets hacked or there's a data breach, who's responsible? Am I going to go to LinkedIn, or am I going to go to that third party that, in my case, I do know who it is, but the majority of people
Mhm.
have no idea, and that's our
Mhm.
identities. So as CISOs, we take on a lot of responsibilities when we have all those APIs all over the place and those cloud suppliers, and we are responsible at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
what is the food chain? What's that supply chain look like? Going down. Going down, because we may be purchasing with a partner that we know who they are, but who is that partner doing business with, and everything on the back end of things. And again, that was another point that that we were talking about in the training last week, was exactly that. It's not just I'm doing business with LinkedIn or I'm doing business with Azure. What what other areas and partnerships and that could affect that. And like I said, you don't see it with like the big three, or but if you're purchasing some kind of SaaS software, what are they relying on? What's their data? What are they using for their data center and everything? Because they've got some sort of compute service that their app's running on, and they've got APIs that their app's running on. What is their security profile, and what is their what are they taking into and does that align with our company's risk profile and risk strategy and business strategies as well? Those are all things that are important to consider. That's just good business.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that you taught the CCSP last week, and you've been teaching not just ISC2 certification, but you've been teaching for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as an instructor, as a professional instructor? What's that like? Because you're not just teaching people who have no idea what they're talking about. It's always very challenging to teach, and I teach CISSP and other courses. It's always very challenging because people in class have just as much experience as I do, sometimes more in specific domains.
Mm-hmm.
How's
Oh
your
yeah,
experience?
yeah. Last week's class was a bunch the whole class was 30 people from the U.S. military in the DoD. So yeah, so they were definitely people that knew a lot about cybersecurity and protecting a lot more than I do. But yeah, but exactly that. It is. I love to teach. It keep I keep getting drawn back to it. I'll give it up. I'll go back to doing cybersecurity or product management and things like that, and I'll keep coming back to it. Just like I said, I decided to do it full time and do it as my own business last October. But I've always felt the most comfortable in my own skin when I was teaching to others and just sharing what I know. Even going back 20 years ago, I wasn't formally teaching Microsoft classes or ISC2 classes, but I was always sharing with people. I worked in a distributor for a while where I managed the local branch of the distributor, and the policy was to hire people right out of college that knew nothing about technology, and I had to teach them what a punch block was, or a switch, or a PBX, and I had to teach them how all of this went together so that they could properly sell to our customers, and that was just always something that was very comfortable to me, and like you said, to talk to people that don't know and are just learning that area, to people that know and are in that industry. And like you said, when I'm teaching ISC2 courses, usually those are people that have have some level of industry experience, because that's a requirement to getting the certification. So there, there's sometimes that level of imposter syndrome, but there's always something that I know that I can bring to the table, and that I know that there's a reason why they're there for this particular subject matter, and I'm the subject matter expert for it. So there's a mutual respect, and that's the thing that you kind of got to take when you're talking to people that know that have been in the industry, and I always feel that there's a mutual respect between me and my students. I respect their thoughts on any topic that they want to share as well, and even if and sometimes you get to a point where you agree to disagree, but it's kind of sometimes when you're teaching a certification course, it's like, I understand that maybe in the real world it's that, but this is how the certification provider looks at it for that too. So you kind of got to take what you know, and sometimes put a pin in that sometimes.
Yeah, I always struggle with that, because I do know that sometimes there's a big gap between how certification bodies, and I'm not saying it as an IC2 representative, I'm just saying as a practitioner in the industry.
Yeah.
There's always a gap. Also, things that are applicable in a big American corporation will not be applicable in a small Israeli startup, for example, because the mentality is different, the size is different. We don't there are different constraints. So when I teach, I always try to tell them, try and think of the perspective. Try and think like a manager with CSSP. Try and think like a manager. Think how you would tackle that, giving the scenario that ISC2 just gave you. They gave you a scenario. They told you you're the CISO at a pharmaceutical company. So you have to put on your thinking caps and think like that. So I always try to give them that perspective. But I tend to agree with you. I think that people that like teaching, and I've been teaching also for over a decade now, I always say that I learn more than I teach, because I learn from each and every one of my students, and I have for the last 10 years plus, because they all have their own perspective and experience and vision. So it's always challenging and fascinating and fun to teach. And I want to reference back to what you mentioned, that you've been doing it for a very long time, sometimes in an official capacity and sometimes in an unofficial capacity. I want to ask you, what sort of advice would you give someone now in either beginning of their cybersecurity career or mid-career? How would you advise them to look ahead? What sort of career pathways can they tackle? How important are certifications in your eyes?
I go back and I go back and forth. I think any type of professional training, and from a reputable industry organization, whether it's ISC2 or SACA or SANS Institute or any of those, if you're looking to understand cybersecurity and understand the foundational the fundamentals of it, as well as even beyond that, that is standards based, that is that has that covers the regulations and understanding that, you should go through formal training. Now, I have a whole lot of certifications. People think I'm like a professional test taker, because I am always coming up with tests with new certifications. But because I'm a teacher, as well as I can teach more classes if I'm certified in more stuff. So that's kind of like a foundational aspect to teaching a class, is having that certification first. So it kind of my wife, who's a elementary school, a public school teacher, is like, why are you constantly taking exams? And I said, because financially that's going to help me, because that's really what it comes down to. But you also learn as you do those, right? And continuing to learn and continuing to move beyond what you know today to what you know tomorrow. I just recently, at the beginning of this year, started doing started taking a SACA and doing more SACA exams, more so because my company became an accredited SACA training organization. But also I've always, always seen ISC2 and Osaka as kind of parallel types of organizations to a degree. They do, they do a lot of the same things, do a lot of benefit the cybersecurity world in very similar ways. And I just never really, I was always ISC2, so I had never really did until the fact that I was starting my own company and decided, hey, and they approached me about becoming accredited. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. So, but to kind of get back to your question and kind of the, kind of taking it, what direction to take. There really isn't a specific direction. I would say that it's what you're passionate about. And, obviously, like I said, I'm passionate about cloud. So I kind of moved to doing that aspect of security and leaning into that. And with that, a lot of AI and machine learning has become a very important part of that, because if knowing and understanding how to use AI and machine learning from a security operations perspective to help make you more efficient in finding cyber threats and things like that, and cloud threats, to also how do you protect against it and all of these bots and all of it being used not for not so good things as well. Those that's obviously a constant technology that's moving forward. I'm getting a lot more customers and people that I'm talking to asking me about operational technology. We've got the everything's connected in buildings and plants, and in traffic and out there. You've got drones all over in places and cameras everywhere, and you're feeding data into your systems. How are you protecting that data, and how are you governing over all of that raw data that's coming in, as well, is something that I've talked to a lot of CISOs about recently as well. So, those are very important technologies that are continuing to expand within our overall technology realm that becomes very important, a very important aspect to cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Well, I think you already led me to my next question, because you talked about cybersecurity and the emerging threats and AI and machine learning, and you mentioned a little bit about the business, and you do come from a very well mixed background, because you have the formal education in business. You have obviously so much experience in technology. Today you run your own business, which is, whether you like it or not, you had to deal with business side as well. How do you combine those two aspects? Because there's always this challenge, because as a security professional, for me, cybersecurity is always the most important thing. But as a business leader and a board member, I have to look at the business and look at other risks as well, and other aspects as well. So how do you balance those two elements?
I've always had an interesting perspective at both of those. I had somebody call me years ago a propeller head with a personality, because I wasn't just like a techie geek about things. I always had, I could pretty much talk to anybody at any level about a lot of things. And I think you've got to have that, kind of in your bag, when you're talking about cybersecurity. And I tell this in a lot of my courses, especially when I'm talking about risk and compliance, and especially like app dev type of security. If you can't speak clearly and give a business case to the business, you're doing overall cybersecurity a disservice. So I feel that it's very important for anybody that's in tech and in cybersecurity to be able to understand the business approach. And that's, one of the things that I, advocate, especially with like the CCSP and the CISSP aspect of things. Whether you're a CISO or not, it gives you at least that perspective of what executives might think about, and how to kind of approach it from that executive level, so that the next time you're looking for that budget for, for security, or to get security in the process of app dev, then you can have that conversation about what the risks are and what the risks are to the business, not necessarily the risks to technology, because the business doesn't care about that. What they care about is getting this app that's going to generate revenue out to market, or available to be used. Well, what's the risk to shortcutting that and not taking security as part of the design of all of that, and throughout the approach to that design, to evaluating and testing APIs and code to make sure there's no vulnerabilities in it prior to release, where if you don't take those risks into light when you're doing that, you're going to get yourself into reputational harm or financial harm, and that's what the business is going to listen to.
Absolutely. Well, again, you mentioned a few things. Then you mentioned teaching, you mentioned learning, we mentioned business, we mentioned a lot of things. I want to ask you, how do you stay up to date? We had conversations about it before, about being a lifelong learner, and I want to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for you? How do you do you sit down at December and look and say, this is what I'm going to learn this year? Or are you just, that's an interesting course, let's take this course? How do you approach lifelong learning?
Probably more the latter than the former. It's one of the things that I will say is in my previous position, one of the things that we did was we put out a quarterly cybersecurity newsletter, essentially, or publications where we all wrote articles. All of our smart people in our company would contribute articles about trends and things like that, and every year we did a trends for the new year, and did a cyber radar of trends, and kind of built a whole wheel of what's going on in cybersecurity and what's coming up in cybersecurity. And those were always ways, obviously, for me to stay fresh and up to date, because I was involved and leading like the cloud security pie piece of that as well. So it forced me to understand that. Obviously, I'm writing, I'd be writing articles, and generally I think that's what keeps me up to date, is very similar, trying to contribute articles and contribute blog posts and things like that. To me, that keeps me learning as well, because I got to do research and understand that technology. If I want to write on something, I don't always write on something I've written on before, or I'll be writing on something that's a trend, that people are talking about, but I want to put my spin on it, and put my knowledge on it, but I need to learn about it, and I need to sound intelligent about it. So that forces me to continue to learn, and that's kind of my process. Is I'll see something that's interesting, or things that everybody are talking about, and then I'll kind of write about it, or do a talk at a user group or something like that. And like you said, when you teach, you learn from your students as well. When you do things like that, when you do talks at events and things, generally you're going to submit something that is that's hot topic, so that you get accepted, and then you get accepted, and you're like, oh, I better learn more about this, so that I sound intelligent about it. So that's kind of how I kind of keep myself fresh and new, and then as well as any new certifications, new training courses, and things that people advertise or see. I usually do use a lot of my feed to learn new things and see what's going on out there.
Absolutely, I love that. I think that being a lifelong learner, being a teacher, makes you learn more. And I have a friend, he's also in cybersecurity. He's a fantastic instructor, and for him, everything he learns, he wants to teach. So if he'll take a course on, I don't know, digital marketing, he'll create a course about digital marketing for cybersecurity professionals. He'll take it into our world. And I actually seen him do it a few times for things like he took a course because he saw an ad and he liked the ad. So he said, I want to learn that skill. And then he took it into cybersecurity. And I found that absolutely amazing. And I try to do the same, not always, but I do try to do the same. And also try and identify areas that I'm interested in, but maybe I don't know enough about. So I always try to like take myself to the next level, but in the right places. Like I don't know enough about penetration testing because last time I did a PT was something like 17 years ago, but I'm not going to do it ever again myself. So there's a limit to how much I need to know about it. Just say, that's for me, because for me going down the rabbit hole is like the things that I do best and worst. Honestly, down the rabbit hole I go. Towards the end of this session, I always do those quick pop-up quiz sort of questions, first thing that comes to mind. And I want to kick this off with the following. If you had any cybersecurity superpower, what would it be?
That's an interesting one. Boy, I mean, any cybersecurity superpower would be probably to understand the risks before they become threats, right? Who wouldn't want that as a cybersecurity superpower, to see the future and see what the next big threat, what's the next ransomware that's going to be out there, right? You know, what's the next the chat GPT that's going to cause havoc to the cybersecurity realm. You know, being able to have that crystal ball obviously is going to be would be a great superpower to have.
Absolutely. How do you unwind or unplug from the world of technology?
I watch, as my wife would attest to, I am always watching sports or old sitcoms.
But it's still technology. Okay, fine.
Well, okay. Well, that's it. That or I also coach. I also coach my son's basketball team. So
see,
I do that. You know, during the winter time as well. So that gets me away from any technology.
Fantastic. What's the most memorable feedback you've ever received? It could be positive, negative. Most memorable feedback.
I think any feedback that I get in class that I can apply is helpful feedback to me. So so if somebody's saying, I wish there was more real world use cases in there and things like that, those are always good. And from a positive standpoint, anybody that says, hey, I passed the exam and you were a primary reason for that, that's why we teach. So getting that kind of feedback, I've had more than one student give me that feedback, and that always feels good when, I always, if I get those emails, I always show those to my wife. I'm like, look, I it kind of validates you as a teacher at that point. So those are always the ones that make me feel good. But I always look at everybody's feedback to see how I can get better too, and find out what maybe I missed that week or in that class.
Fantastic. How do you celebrate your achievements?
How do I celebrate my achievements? I celebrate my achievements through just through just being around my family and through sharing it with them. That validates things when I get an achievement. Obviously, we all have our digital friends and everything on LinkedIn. Obviously, sharing on LinkedIn and things like that. But certainly, like I said, a lot of my achievements are my students' achievements, and them passing exams. I get a lot more out of that than necessarily me passing an exam myself.
Yes, it's always fun getting that feedback suddenly from a student from the past. Oh, I passed the exam today. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's why we teach.
Yep.
And last but
That's
not least, if your cybersecurity journey was a movie, what would be the title?
I could use. You were on my podcast that I started, Skill Up Like a Superhero, and I think kind of that would be my title of my superhero movie would be that. It kind of encapsulates my brand of Captain Hyperscaler and the lifelong learning aspect of things, and the way that I approach myself teaching as well as teaching others is you have your own origin story, your own hero saga. Skill yourself up like a superhero, continually learn, continue to be better, and that's that would be. I'd probably use that as the title of my story.
I love that. Dwayne, thank you so much for joining me today. It was enlightening, and I hope people picked up a few nuggets, I'm sure they did, about learning and evolving and growing, which is what it's all about. We don't have crystal balls yet. Maybe we will. Maybe that will be the next AI. Crystal ball.
Yeah, crystal ball, ChatGPT, right?
Exactly. We will start working on that. Amazing. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see everyone next time on CyberMAYnia.